In the middle here, we have Mohammed Ashour, who's the CEO of Aspire. Aspire is a social enterprise conceived of in 2013 as part of the Hult Prize, which is the world's largest and most prestigious competition for social entrepreneurs. Aspire seeks to disrupt chronic food insecurity and malnutrition by developing low-cost and high-output farming of edible insects. Did anyone notice the quiche? The crunchy part on the quiche? Okay. Buddy Teester, closer here to me, he leads the largest provider in free shoes to children in need around the world. Soles4Souls distributes clothes and shoes directly to people in need and to selected micro-enterprise organizations around the world. Tony Wells on the left, who many of you know is a local star in this scene. He is the co-founder and CEO of the Tony Wells Foundation, which fosters entrepreneurship and social investing by nonprofit organizations. His foundation currently sponsors the Social Innovation Initiative at The Ohio State University. Please join me in welcoming these panelists. Let's start with Tony and move here. Can you give?
Start with the old guy, right?
Can you give us a few minutes on your organization, just to kind of get us oriented?
Well, good morning, everyone. As Patrick mentioned, my wife and I are so blessed. We're now in our 14th year as a family foundation here in Columbus. We started our own company years ago, had the opportunity to sell it, and decided the second half of our career was going to be focused as a family foundation. As we looked around the community back in the early 2000s, one of the challenges was embracing social entrepreneurship and particularly having a funding community who recognized the value of social impact investing in social entrepreneurship. And so here we are 14 years later. We're not the Bill Gates Foundation. We have a lot less zeros in our bank account. But we now have 7 people on our staff, and they're out there in the community every single day working with nonprofits to build social enterprises. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony. Mohammed?
Good morning. My name is Mohammed Ashour. I'm the CEO of Aspire. As Patrick mentioned, we actually spun off after winning the 2013 Hult Prize. At the time, of course, I was in medical school with no idea that a few months after that, I'd be leaving medical school to farm insects for a living. But our solution was really inspired by the global challenge of food insecurity that affects billions of people and will in the next 30 years as we see our population expand. I'm really excited to talk to you a little bit more about what we do at Aspire. Our team now is over 12 people in 3 countries, Ghana, Mexico, and actually Austin, Texas, are 3 areas of operations. So we'll look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Mohammed. Buddy?
I probably have not disappointed my mother as much as you have, right? Maybe I have, I don't know. I'm with Soles4Souls. We've been around since 2006. There's a folder on all the chairs, so I won't go into a lot other than to say, since we started in 2006, we've distributed, this year will be about 25 million pairs of shoes in more than 125 countries. We give about half of what we collect away. Each year we collect between 4 and 5 million pair. Half we give away to people in need. So we're trying to get shoes into Nepal right now, for example. We distribute shoes in all across the United States and around the world. We also have a very active microenterprise program where we take all the used shoes that we collect and we sell them to people in the developing world, and they resell them as a way to make a living. And we found that something that we think that we're finished with here, for example, we throw away about 4 billion pounds of textiles every year in this country that have another life that can be had in the developing world. Those products are in demand. People are willing to repair, clean, turn it into something that they can use to improve their housing, education. Nutrition is often a big one in healthcare. So we're trying to find more ways to collect what goes into the trash here that we can then put to a higher use in the developing world.
Great. Let's talk, Tony, if you don't mind passing to Tony. I thought Tony could kind of give us a lay of the land in terms of those of us who aren't in this field every day of every week. What is social entrepreneurship? What is social enterprise? Are we talking about nonprofits that are having earned income? Are we talking about companies that are trying to solve the social? What the heck is it? Or is there a definition around it? Can you help kind of give us the lay of the land?
Sure. When we started the foundation in 2001, our two programmatic areas was technology and social entrepreneurship. And I'll be the first one to admit that from about 2001 to about 2006, we were having a difficult time, even here in Columbus, getting traction around social entrepreneurship. And social entrepreneurship is often motivated by some type of a catalyst. And so if you think about, over the last 14, 15 years, we had the tech bubble, then we had the financial crisis. And I think finally, while there are certain nonprofits who've been doing it for years, everyone knows the Girl Scouts, right? So that's probably the longest running social enterprise. The idea that you can have a commercial activity that raises money to serve their mission, but also is very mission-based, where they're providing empowerment and independence and communications for young women going out there, knocking on doors, would you like to buy a box of cookies? But for many nonprofits here in our own community, it's really been in the last 6 or 7 years where it's really taken hold. Primarily, again, because the decrease in funding by many sources, but also in 2007, 2008, many foundations like ours was hit fairly hard. Many of us lost 30% of our endowment, had to rein in the amount of giving that we were providing. And nonprofits woke up to the idea of that, I've got to find other sources. When they first realized I've already tapped every donor that I can, and I have government funding that may have been exhausted. What are the other commercial activities that maybe we could create that doesn't have strings attached to it? So social enterprise is typically defined as any type of commercial activity that you're doing, but first and foremost is serving your mission. And then secondly, social entrepreneurs is normally the individual that you identify as the person who's leading the charge. So oftentimes in our existing nonprofits, we just call them social enterprises because they're within the structure. For those first-time social entrepreneurs who are graduating from college and decided, they're going to take the skills and knowledge that they developed at the university and fulfill their passion of doing something good for the world, they're typically social entrepreneurs. So hope that gives some context.
Yeah. So does it matter whether they set it up as a company or a nonprofit?
No, we provide funding both to for-profits and nonprofit social enterprises. Most of them are within nonprofits. And Mohammed and I were talking a little bit earlier about the pros and cons. So, if you've got a social enterprise, say within a YMCA or a Goodwill, the safety net for us is we can look to the organization and they've got a strong brand, strong leadership team, normally have their own resources. They've got the ability to execute. But it could be like turning the battleship. They're not very fast, not very agile, right? Or I shared the experience that we invested $175,000 into two 24-year-olds about 18 months ago in a social enterprise, and they have struggled. And they've struggled because they don't have any experience managing people, running a company. And today's generation coming out of the university believes in a lean startup. You just do everything by the seat of your pants. There's no value in planning or writing down estimates or doing a project plan or doing financial projections or holding ourselves accountable. Let's just go out there. Let's go out there and get it done. And so for the challenges, we work with across the spectrum, but each one of them has their challenges with execution.
Great. Let me ask Mohammed the next question before we get too technical, which we can and will. Mohammed, you're a high school student, then you're going and getting an MBA, and somehow you get into this idea of crickets, eating crickets. So just how? What the heck?
Yeah, sure. So so I was actually doing a joint degree at McGill, an MD and an MBA. And during the MBA portion of my degree, I came across the Hult Prize competition, which was a call to action by Bill Clinton to come up with a way to solve food insecurity by building a for-profit entity that is a social enterprise at its heart. And I put together a team of my colleagues from the MBA program. We actually had a resume book that had everybody's resume in my class, so it was a nice way to kind of recruit people without hurting feelings. And I brought together a really interesting mix, someone who's an investment banker, someone who's a lawyer, someone who had a lot of expertise in marketing, and another guy who was a serial entrepreneur that built an electric bike business. And we all came together and decided, to look at how can we apply our skills to this problem. Typically, a big challenge in for a lot of people, especially going to do MBAs, is that they're kind of in that stage in their career where they're ready to take some sort of promotion within their organization, or to move laterally into a different senior sort of manager role somewhere else. Job security, income stability, these are all very important things. So it's kind of not the right audience of people to tell them, hey, why don't you kind of just put that aside and let's focus on trying to do good for the world, yay. But when at the same time, when you actually take those kinds of minds and apply them to these problems, you actually can develop solutions that typically you wouldn't see, when these kinds of divergent, thinkings go into these kinds of problems. And this is something that we've been really interested in trying to more or less trailblaze the road for. Is it, how do you attract not necessarily the people who have always had an inclination to doing good or always been volunteers when they were in high school and got all sorts of awards, but the investment bankers, what would incentivize a Wall Street person who actually can apply some really impressive financial modeling to serious world challenges? How do you get them to do that, and what are the metrics for that? So, we came together, came up with all sorts of interesting ideas, but the litmus test was always one question. Would you drop out of your MBA or medical school or your law career? Would you put off that offer from that investment bank or that management consulting firm to start this? And the answer was often no. Until one day, 2 weeks before the semifinal round of the competition, I sort of came in and asked that question again in the beginning of the meeting, and everybody's answer was this kind of grudging no or hesitant no. So I said, you know what, guys, let's just go off in completely random directions, talk to total strangers, and not come back until everybody has 3 out-of-the-box, insane ideas. And one of the people I happened to corner over the weekend was a good friend of mine at his birthday party, no less, who happens to be a physician. And we were having a conversation around poverty and food security. He mentioned to me that he saw a patient a few days prior to that who complained of GI issues. And when he asked her what she had consumed as part of the history taking, she mentioned in passing that she had chocolate-covered ants. So he looked at her and put his pen down and said, oh, there you go, that's the answer. Who eats chocolate-covered ants? And she was visibly offended. And she said to him, I don't know what you're talking about, but this is actually food in my country. This has always been a part of my diet. In fact, I think it was probably the pretzels on the airplane. So, so he looked at me and he said, it's interesting that for so many people, apparently insects are food. And I looked at him and said, yeah, that is actually very interesting. Interesting is the right word. Let's leave it at that. It's gross. But then I remember leaving and on my way home thinking, that wasn't a very particularly scientific way to dismiss an entire, aspect of human practice, which apparently is very prevalent. So let me look this up. And I went home, did some research, and, the rest is history. Insects are consumed by over 2 billion people around the world in over 80% of the world's countries. They are pound for pound more nutritious than any form of conventional livestock that exists. It requires drastically less land, water, feed, and they emit a negligible amount of greenhouse gases to emit. And most importantly, they're delicious in many countries.
Wow. Now we, as part of this, and you may see it on our Facebook page, that the staff and I, Shannon was one of them, and Kevin, who's not here, we tasted crickets, and they were not the kind you put out. So the deliciousness factor was not there. But I'm excited, yeah.
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, now we've actually established a facility in Austin, Texas, and the focus of that is to, number one, supplement a growing demand we have in Mexico, but number two, to service a ballooning demand in the US. And the reason for that isn't because people are, lining up to buy crickets that are roasted and they're ready to just pop them in, Fear Factor style. More so, we've developed a product where we actually take crickets, we grind them into a fine powder that is essentially odorless and effectively serves as a superfood supplement that can be used to fortify any food product. And a lot of businesses purchase this, cricket flour to make cookies, to make, peanut butter and jelly energy bars, et cetera, et cetera. So there are applications for it. And when you think of the history of lobsters, as many of you I'm sure are aware, lobsters used to be the food of poor people. And without getting into it too much, just one simple example is that there used to actually be laws that prohibited prisons from feeding inmates more than 3 times a week lobster because it was considered cruel and unusual punishment. So it's interesting to see.
Wow. Thank you. All right, let's switch to things we have seen and do ourselves, which is wear shoes. Buddy, if you could just kind of take us the first step, why shoes? What's so important about shoes in terms of the world's poor? And then maybe then take us to, okay, giving shoes is great. Now I want to use it to start social enterprises for others and get into this area of how you turned that.
So if you think about what your one day would be like if you didn't have the shoes that you have on your feet right now, where would you not want to go, be able to go? What would you be prevented from doing? And then take that to an entirely different level of, in many developing countries, if you don't have a pair of shoes, you can't go to school. So even if you have the money, for example, to come up with the tuition, the uniform, and the books, and in many countries where we work, the public education option is not available for most people, so they have to go to private. Often shoes will be the things that they can't swing. They don't have very good access to them, and they're very expensive. So starting at the most fundamental thing, I can't go to school, and there are many soil-borne parasites, totally preventable by wearing shoes, that cause incredible damage, shame, death, not so much, but disfigurement. All you have to do is wear a pair of shoes. We're working on Kenya right now, for example, it's caused by a flea called jiggers. Lives in the soil. It can prevent you from walking, so you can't go to school, you can't work. There's a lot of shame around that in many communities. 100% preventable by wearing shoes. So we can't eradicate it, but if we could bring shoes in, there are dramatic opportunities for improved productivity and education. So very simple in a way. I can't go to school, I can't be healthy. So when we think about the opportunity to provide shoes, whether they're given away for free or in the microenterprise model, it is such a fundamental need. Most of us don't think about it here, but all you have to do is spend a few hours. We do, this October we'll do Barefoot Week, culminates in Barefoot for Them. It's a one-day go without shoes. A lot harder than you think. You find out public bathrooms actually in America are terrible. You don't want to go in with no shoes to those, right? You're not allowed into restaurants. You can't go into the library. All these things are shut off from you. So it's a little artificial, but it gives you some insight into what that might be like. When you make it every day and you don't have an option, it's an entirely different level of experience. What we have found is the demand for used shoes is off the charts. In many countries, and I know there's some controversy around giving used stuff to the developing world. Some of that's legitimate. How many more Notre Dame shirts do they need in Africa? And I get that. But in places where we work, Haiti's a good example, there is no domestic shoe manufacturing. So every shoe is brought in. And the market for new shoes, which are very expensive, is super small. People who can afford that generally go to Miami, Boston, DC to buy shoes. They're not buying them in Haiti. So most everybody in that country that buys shoes buys them in the open market. What we found is by cutting out several steps in the supply chain, and this is business 101, right? Our customers who are buying these shoes want quality shoes at a good price consistently, right? There's no magic to that. They don't really care about our mission. But when we can provide that, and they have a different quality shoe, for example, than everybody else in the market, their inventory turns faster, they get a premium price, and we're able to provide them, in some cases, we think up to a triple their income. So for example, before we got involved in Haiti in our microenterprise model, these women were mostly buying shoes at about $8 a pair that were crappy shoes, right? They were at the end of the supply chain, so they'd been picked over and the price had gone up. And they were getting about $10 in the market. We come in and we work with a local partner who's providing credit and education and support for these entrepreneurs. Now that she's getting shoes for $4 a pair, so her margin's gone to $6, and her shoes are gone like that. We don't have any influence how she spends her money, right? But what we know and what we're getting ready to study in more detail is she built a house, she had, kids are in school, all these things that she knows exactly what to do. If she has the tools, we can help provide the tools. We all can help provide the tools. These are, on average, men in America have 12 pairs of shoes in their closet, women have 27. I'm not getting into how much you need, but when you decide to replace some of the 27 or the 12, the best thing that you can do, whether it's Goodwill or Salvation Army or Soles4Souls, put those to work. The worst thing you can do for the environment and for people who are looking for a way out of poverty is to throw them in the trash.
Wow, thank you. As a reminder, questions on your note cards, just kind of go like that and we'll come around. We have some here, so I'll feed them in while I ask the questions that I have. This one here, what role do you see the lack of reliable electricity having in making effective anti-poverty efforts more difficult to implement? Does anyone want to tackle that one? It's kind of a broad one.
I'll tackle some, and Mohammed, you may have plenty to add as well. Again, places like Haiti, Honduras, Philippines, where we're doing a lot of work right now, poor or no access to electricity in many cases means there's not going to be any manufacturing at any scale that's going to happen, right? So those industries, it's unlikely that there's any kind of scale soon. Many of in here will know Tom's. They, through the Clinton initiative, they have 50 jobs in Haiti right now making shoes that are made to give away, right? Their quality's not there yet to sell, when you go to Nordstrom's. But they are hampered. I mean, talking to them, they are hampered by they don't have regular electricity. The school that we work with just outside of Port-au-Prince, they have electricity from maybe 5 o'clock at night to 5 o'clock in the morning. The rest of the day, the school runs on car batteries. They have this giant stack of 12 car batteries. So imagine what that's like if you're trying to give a kid an education and use a computer and have wireless access, which you have to learn. Maybe it's there, maybe it's not. So I think from scaling up, being able to create jobs, which is how you're going to fight poverty ultimately, is more job creation. That's a real struggle. To can you deliver a decent day's education when you don't have electricity? So those are two easy ones for me.
Okay. Did you want to speak or okay? Let me ask another one here. This one, millennials are big into cause marketing and often align themselves to companies and ventures that engage in these kind of causes. What are some ways young people can get involved in a substantial way beyond simply saying they care about a cause or another? Tony, you want to kick that one off, you think?
So just a little background, one of the things we do as a foundation is we're always studying the macro trends of what's influencing philanthropy and what's influencing social entrepreneurship. And so taking off on the cause marketing today is $1.8 billion, right? And so while most of us know that of the $335 billion that was donated to charities last year, that corporations are only 5%, and that is stuck at 5 and 6% for many, many years, corporations are really doing some incredible work inside the organization with corporate social responsibility, cause marketing, and cause marketing is actually geared towards the millennials because they've yet reached to the point in their career where they have the excess money to be able to be junior philanthropists. So it's really geared towards helping them feel like they're contributing towards society by lifting up a brand. And of course, for corporations, it's excellent as well. Probably our local champion of that is Tom Murray at Barbasol Shaving Cream. The guy's just a marketing genius, and he's done multiple cause marketing events. And if you've ever listened to Ohio State on the radio, every time that they score a touchdown, you'll hear them say, "Another $1,000 for a kid again by Barbasol Shaving Cream." Right? So cause marketing is one of those macro level trends that's really blending into social entrepreneurship. So you've got corporations becoming more social, you've got nonprofits becoming more business-like, but I think there's many opportunities for the millennials, especially from a volunteer standpoint. The thing that we always recognize and what we hear from millennials is stop treating us as a volunteer, treat us as a donor. Treat us as the same level of respect as any other donor, because while we don't have the money to give, we'll show up and we will volunteer, and we will work hard for you. And so even this summer, we have 4 interns who are working in the foundation, working on social enterprise projects for the YMCA, for design outreach, and others, where they're coming to us because they want that experience. They want to volunteer their time. They want to create something more than just volunteering. So yeah, I think there's a lot of activities. That's the audience it's targeted toward. But I wouldn't give up on them in terms of saying there's not other things they can contribute.
Would you say, I think sometimes there's a tendency, I know I had this when I was younger, it's a great idea, I should just start a business or start a nonprofit. And now that I've been in the field for 10 or 15 years, I think first thing I would say is don't start a new one, don't start a new company. First figure out if there's one already and try to, but at the same time, you want to foster that entrepreneurship. How do you handle that when you have young people coming to you with that kind of thought process?
Yeah, so we try to help them understand what their strengths are. They may have a great idea, but we do kind of help them do a self-analysis of, what other partners would you need to strengthen your ability to launch. And sometimes you may come from a business background, but you may need some medical expertise, or you may need food science and so forth. And so without just saying you shouldn't do it, I think it's more about helping them understand how successful they will be independently versus if we could align you with another nonprofit who maybe has the depth of the management experience and can provide you the HR and the accounting and all the back office while you chase those entrepreneurial dreams. You've got to have someone, that's flying cover for you to make sure the wheels are staying on the track. And so it's hard because half the companies in this room were created by when they were working for someone else, they thought they could do it better. Right? So you can't kill entrepreneurship. But for social entrepreneurship, there's so many assets that are available in our community that would strengthen their ability to be more successful that we try to align them with other collaborators.
Mohammed, what would you say to a millennial came asking these kind of questions?
Yeah, so I mean, first on the cause marketing, one of the things that makes me a little bit nervous, to be honest, is we live in a time when things trend very quickly and die very quickly, and attention spans are getting smaller and shorter, and everybody's competing for very limited real estate of attention at any given moment in time. And why that's problematic is because when you try to, a lot of the challenges that our world is facing are actually not short term at all. They require one to really have to think in the shoes of them 40 years from that point. You're talking about the world having 9 billion people in 2050. That's a big number, and it's so abstract. It's hard to really relate to something like that. But that's precisely the problem. It's because it's so unrelatable compared to the acute urgency of a problem that is present right now that you kind of have these competing interests. So one of the things for us is to try and I mean, I could not be understated what Tony just said, which is to give the younger sort of vibrant, wanting to contribute a lot of time, don't have a lot of money but want to give a lot of time, and eventually that will be converted to money, by the way. But even in the short term, to give them equity in these problems and to actually engage them and use their time in a way that allows them to feel like they've contributed significantly to an actual problem. And this is something that we try to do. And so related to the second part, when someone comes and they're very entrepreneurial, that's actually a fantastic thing. And I think the challenge is for an organization to evolve in such a way that it creates the room for entrepreneurial-minded people to come in and feel that they have the autonomy of an entrepreneur, but at the same time, the overall idea of a team and an overall mission, so that they are kept in check. There is a perimeter, a healthy perimeter, in which they can sort of play, and everybody can play, but everybody is bound by an overall mission. And I think that's the key. When an entrepreneur is bound by a mission, they're happy to be restricted to that. And they don't see it as a restriction, but rather they see it as a way to organize themselves, because that's the sort of unfortunate flip side of the coin of being an entrepreneur. Notoriously not very organized and always distracted by new opportunities and very risk-taking. So there has to be a mechanism in place to balance that. So we actually really welcome very entrepreneurial people, and we look to give them the space to exercise that entrepreneurship, because we know if we don't, they're going to go and exercise it elsewhere anyway. And we want people to constantly challenge the status quo, but it's within a framework.
Great. Buddy, did you want to comment on that?
On the cause marketing, it's a huge part of what we do. We work with lots of footwear companies, apparel companies, other retailers. The thing that I think where we see it work the best is where it is not a gimmick, where it's not a me too kind of thing. So for example, Stride Right, many of you here will know Stride Right if you have kids. We did a cause marketing program with them last year that was very successful. They collected almost 80,000 pairs of shoes in a month. It was a big deal. But their customer is kind of the millennial now, who's worried about, I'm switching shoes every 6 months or more. I don't want to throw them away. What do I do? And so Stride Right started this idea of bringing a pair of shoes, used shoes will give you a discount. What they saw is that connected with their customer so well is they are now going to year-round offer this. So their customer she can always come in and have this. So that kind of cause marketing to us is, and they've upped their commitment to donate shoes and money. It's phenomenal. They think it works for them. They are a very metric-driven company. They've got more traffic, more conversion, more online. All the stuff they cared about also went up. So that to us is the right kind of cause marketing, and it works because it's integrated with who they are. There are other things that we do. Sometimes I think, okay, this is a one-week deal and we will never see these guys again. So that's what we're trying to get better at. How do we make sure that the partners that we align with really want to make a difference and aren't just like, how do I get a bump in sales because I need a Q4 is almost over. That's the kind of thing that we're starting to be a little savvier about. On the entrepreneur thing, I'm sort of in the like, please God, don't start another one, because so many of them are, someone used this example the other day. How many more make your own yogurt shops do we need? Not a lot. But so many, it seemed like an opportunity, people jump into it, and that's what is driving a lot of this. There are lots of not-for-profits out there that are only Me Too. What you're doing, Mohammed, is game-changing, right? So that's the kind of entrepreneurship that makes a lot of sense, and I know you have to spread your bets. But I think channeling that entrepreneurial energy, especially when they're just out of college or early in their career, we work with entrepreneurs. We have 4 values: transparency, entrepreneurship, accountability, and meaningful work. So we push if we're going to work with entrepreneurs, we can't be, risk averse, taking this very structured approach when these people live and die by how well they do as an entrepreneur. So we try to find a way to make that work and bring people in who want to support that. If you're going to start something, man, it better be super hot, because we don't need another one like X. And that's my concern with many of these social entrepreneurship programs and college programs is, like, what are you going to do with that? And so I think it's been elevated to almost kind of a mythic status without there being a lot of support underneath for making it work.
Yeah. Patrick,
Please.
if I could just make one more comment. Being associated with the university and teaching a program on social entrepreneurship, there's a couple academic conferences that are related to social entrepreneurship. And one of the shifts in terminology in the last 3 years is over 50% of the universities now refer to it as social innovation versus social entrepreneurship. And the reason being is that when you say entrepreneurship, that immediately implies you have the temperament to actually step off the curb, take the risk and make it happen, where the majority of people, whether you're working at Emit Nutrition or you're working for another corporation who's creating great products, it's really about innovation. It's about social innovation, and you shouldn't be attracted to social entrepreneurship, or maybe I should say you shouldn't be excluded from social entrepreneurship because of this premise that you are going to be the person who's going to start the organization. We want to create this environment of social innovation, so no matter if you're the entrepreneur or the non-entrepreneur, that you embrace that.
Got it. All right. We're going to ask some more questions, but I wanted everyone to think. If you've got one and you really want to ask it out loud, you can just raise your hand and I'll come over. Martijn here is one of the most entrepreneurial lawyers I've ever met, so he's always a good one to talk to, and probably has one of the questions in here. All right, a little speed round. Ready? You just got to pass the mic, and you get as you answer it and then pass the mic. We're going to have a couple questions. It's like 10-second answer.
Wow.
All right, we'll start with this one. What is the bigger challenge currently within the social enterprise market? And again, this is speed rounds, whatever just comes to mind. And if we have to delete the video later, we can edit it, because we do plan to use these for students. So here's which one's bigger? A lack of sophisticated companies or entrepreneurs, that's one. Or is the bigger challenge, 2, a lack of sophisticated funders and dollars available for investment?
There's currently $1 billion sitting on the sidelines to help social entrepreneurship. It's the other side that doesn't even know how to get it.
Bam.
A.
Bam. There's no C, so don't.
Yeah, so I think it's the disconnect between lots of great ideas and funders and they can't find each other. That is hands down for me the biggest challenge.
Got it. All right, hang on to that mic. We'll go back the other way. All right. Is it better to make a lot of money in a traditional company and then give it away for a good cause, or make it a social enterprise?
So I haven't made a lot of money in the first one, so I don't have that experience. I've never been happier in my life than what I'm doing right now. We say no mission without margin. I get to do both every day. Never been happier.
I too have a lot of student loans to pay. But for me, I genuinely believe that doing good and doing well are not mutually exclusive. And there is a way, in fact, to be able to connect what you're passionate about with an ability to make money. And I don't think it has to be either working for a corporation and making donations or working in a nonprofit organization and taking a huge pay cut.
Great.
So I'd say 20 years ago, we didn't have a choice. Today, we have a choice.
Great. Okay, hang on to that. We got another one. President Obama's on his way, and he's going to ask us a question. He's going to ask you guys this question. Hey, what can I do to help make this world a better place? And you're going to tell him in 10 seconds.
Well, first off, I'll just acknowledge something that maybe most people aren't aware of. The Obama administration put together a $50 million social innovation fund that's called the SIF. And it has been a huge contributor to social entrepreneurship, social innovation. So already done a lot, always can do more.
It's to connect the resources and the people. I don't think we have lack of money. I don't think we have lack of intelligence. I think we have a lack of connecting the two. And if we're able to fund the right people to do the right things, it will solve a lot of problems in a very short order.
Okay.
Curbside recycling in every city.
All right, good. Flip, we'll do one last one on a speed round. Do you have any current job openings? Or will you?
If you can bring in revenue, yes.
I like that answer.
Yes, we do.
We do, primarily working in our social enterprises. So real quick, we realized a couple years ago that a lot of our nonprofits couldn't stand up the social enterprise. So we took their social enterprise and moved it inside the foundation as an accelerator to help them groom it up. So we're hiring people to work specifically on projects for our nonprofit community.
Great. Okay. I think this might be for Buddy. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. How do your companies solve the shipping cost problems? To ship your used shoes and other things, postal costs are not cheap. How did you solve this?
We haven't solved it. It's probably, after payroll, our second biggest expense. The way that we manage it a lot is work with partners who, if we provide the product, they provide the shipping. That often can be a good match. We think that we leave somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million pairs of shoes a year on the table. So somebody here in Columbus will collect, they say, I'm going to collect 50 shoes. They end up collecting 500 pairs of shoes. They're feeling great. They go to UPS or FedEx or the post office, and the guy says, that's going to be $500. And they're like, I'm out. So the shoes don't make it to us. So we're trying to find ways to have easier access to warehouses where people can drop off shoes. We collect them, and then we can move them at our cost. And that's one strategy that we have. We are working with, I'll give you a great example. So Brighton Collectibles, some of you may know, I don't know if they have stores here or not. They have about 200 stores across the country. They're doing a shoe drive this month. We were able to reach out to people who had committed to do shoe drives but hadn't sent the shoes and said, hey, drop them off at Brighton. 20,000 shoes that we had totally lost track of reappeared. So it's all the time, it's sort of guerrilla attack on that, but it is hands down our biggest collection problem, and mostly we're trying to find partners to manage it around. But for example, I mentioned this, trying to get a container of shoes into Kenya from China. It was $10,000 to ship it, $3,000 to move it overland from Mombasa to the capital, an additional $10,000 in customs and duties. And so that's not sustainable for us. For a shipment of 26,000 pairs of shoes to spend $1 a pair, that we can't consistently do that. So we've got to be smarter and find partners.
Got it. Mohammed, just you kind of taking that same concept to your business, what is the number one or number two biggest challenges for you as an organization right now in terms of between where you are now and where you want to be?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge really is scale. I mean, remember, we're operating in 3 totally different geographies, very different cultures, very different approaches. So I think our real challenge is that as we scale as a team and grow as a team, and obviously our DNA changes because more people come in, how do we maintain that same fabric, that same commitment to the same cause? How do we have local relevance but sort of a global consistency? These are challenges that I don't think, frankly, we anticipated, and they're typically challenges that you hear larger corporations dealing with, not startups. But it is an actual challenge that we have because, the way we run, it's, first you have to have your strategy, then you have to have your structure in place, then culture, then people. When your cultural elements in terms of what are the things that your organization, values, what are the things that are important to you, when those are clearly articulated and consistent, it's not hard to get the right people. But that's surprisingly very difficult.
Good. Tony, are there any other things they didn't mention that you see in the social enterprises that you work with that are, this is the one or two big issues that everyone goes through?
Correct. I think for most social enterprises, and again, we think about over the last 14 years, you just got to respect that nonprofits are just natural problem solvers. I remember meeting with UCP, and we were talking about creating a social enterprise, and they said, we created a one-handed pool cue. I said, what does that mean? They said, well, a lot of people have cerebral palsy. They don't have access to both. So they like playing pool. So we figured out a way to use a one-handed pool cue. And maybe that could be our social enterprise. And we're like, great, can we see it? And they brought it into the room, and they'd actually taped a matchbox to the end of the pool cue, so it rolls across the felt. They're natural problem solvers, even in the simplest way, but oftentimes nonprofits can't figure out how to scale those ideas or capitalize on those ideas of creating new revenue streams. And so what we have learned over time is as soon as an executive director or senior manager goes to their board and says, I want to create a social enterprise, and it's going to cost us $100,000, and we may not make money for several years, the board just blows it up. Because they're risk averse, they got precious resources, and the idea that we can invest on something that's not going to make money for a couple years. And so the biggest challenge for nonprofits and boards today is having the education to understand there's many ways that you can do it that doesn't jeopardize your tax exempt status. You can create a for-profit subsidiary of your nonprofit organization. We are actually co-investors with nonprofits into social enterprise ideas that they decided to move outside their nonprofit and put it into a sister company. And so the biggest gap today is having the education for both nonprofit leaders and boards to understand that there's many ways to do this, and instead of just shutting down the idea because of thinking about their own limitations, think about really focusing on what the social impact could be. If that's the most important thing we can do, and that's our limitation, we've got to find other people to do it. And if that means moving into a sister company and hiring people with better technology skills, better marketing skills, better management skills, then that's what we should do instead of giving up on the idea.
Good. Thank you. Thanks to Jackie and Role Model Matt and Stephanie Union and Bruce McFerrin for your tweets. And Bruce, who is the dean at the OSU's College of Food, Ag, and Environmental Science. I wonder if one of these questions you might answer, but I see your tweet, and it was one of the questions in the audience too around universities. Arguably not agile, but are home to tens of thousands of society's most agile minds. How do we engage new social entrepreneurs? And it relates to one of the questions from the audience about how can universities help foster the skills needed to create people like you?
Well, first of all, it's very flattering. Thank you. But I think the challenge really is that schools are like any sort of regulatory body. I think the idea is there, but in terms of execution, it's actually very much backwards. Take a look at MBA programs, for example. An MBA program is this 2-year degree program where you go in really not so much to learn how to make spreadsheets, but really to tap into a larger network, potentially to leapfrog in your career. And a lot of MBA programs are designed to attract entrepreneurs, but the way an entrepreneur learns typically isn't in a classroom. It's by actually going out and doing things in the field. So in my mind, I've always thought that an ideal entrepreneurship program, and actually Mohammed Ashour, the CEO of the Hult Prize, this is something he's in the process of trying to roll out, is imagine if you go to a school and rather than paying tuition to sit in a classroom, a portion of your tuition actually pays mentors who themselves are entrepreneurs, and then another portion is seed capital to fund your idea. And you spend most of your time actually trying to run a business. So I think that we can talk about social enterprise, we can give classes about social enterprise, we can hold seminars and all that. And to be fair, those have actually been successful models. I'm actually incredibly amazed at just how much interest social enterprise and social innovation have garnered in just the past few years. And I can't go anywhere without people talking about it like a buzzword, but then it also suffers from the concern that it could be also a gimmicky thing. So that's something that I think universities should really aim to do, is to create the ecosystem that actually makes it possible for social and enterprise and innovation not only to spawn but to thrive, as opposed to just the typical didactic talking about it and case studies and things of that sort.
Thank you. Please.
And this is maybe more of a traditional answer, but it's something that we've just recently started to leverage a lot. So I mentioned that we're trying to measure our impact in Haiti. We sort of have a pretty good idea of what our direct impact is, but we don't on the second and third order effects. We think it's a lot, but we don't know. So with Maria, who many of you know here, we are working with the Vanderbilt Institute of Global Health. That was not an obvious idea, but they bring rigor and expertise into how do you measure impact. Their students need real-world problems to solve, sort of to your point, Mohammed. And so between their classwork and their field work, they are going to, this will be the first year of what will be a 10-year study of what is the impact of people selling shoes that they get from us, and those who do and those who don't, and kind of how do they compare. So I think that's one way, is to give people real experience. There's nothing academic about 10 weeks in Haiti, right? She'll come back a different person, I feel quite sure from that. So she'll have some sense of what social enterprise could mean, what the impact could be, and she'll bring that back. Whether or not she ever does anything in social enterprise, she's going to be a much more informed person, and I think there's a ton of value in that.
Yeah. Tony, please.
Yeah, I just want to make one more comment related to the potential of the university. Every year, we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on research, and inventors are creating things, and we're patenting things at the university, but they typically sit on a shelf. So we became the first family foundation to actually license 3 pieces of technology from Ohio State. It took me 2 years of convincing at Ohio State to be able to do that, because they just couldn't imagine why a philanthropic organization could potentially commercialize a piece of technology that was socially benefiting when the potential of that technology was only worth maybe $3 million. They want the next Gatorade. They want the next cure for cancer. There's so much research that goes on and great inventions that are sitting inside the university that could be easily unlocked by students, faculty members, and outside interested parties if the university would just be more open to the idea of partnering with philanthropy and just not commercial entities.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Do you want to add anything? No? Okay. Speed round again. We get a lot of questions, so I got to get them through. Start with you, Tony, since you got the mic. We'll put this as one question, but it's got a few parts. 1, can you leave your business card so we can connect talented people to those job openings?
Absolutely.
And we'll collect them and send an email out. We do this anyway.
Easy.
Next. Yep. And the next question is, how large is your company and how many employees versus volunteers? Why don't we start?
Right. Being a family foundation, the volunteers we have are typically business professionals who are in between gigs. And while they're in between gigs, and sometimes it could be 4 to 6 months looking for a job, they want to come volunteer, but they want to work on business plans. They want to work on solving problems. So that's how we leverage volunteers. We have 7 employees on the foundation staff and 4 interns for the summer, so we're very small.
Great. Thanks. Mohammed, business card, employees, volunteers.
Yes, to business card employees. So we have 12 full-time staff, and a part of our business model actually is that we've developed individual farming units that we roll out to smallhold farmers, most of whom are women, to actually grow insects for their own consumption and their families, and of course the rest they sell at a surplus. Just want you to ponder for a second about the measurable, dramatic quality and life improvement for a mother who now actually has the means to be able to secure food for her kids, especially protein, on a regular basis, when we know that the first 1,000 days of life are critical for later outcomes in health. And that network spans over 1,000 farmers in between Ghana and Mexico.
Got it. Buddy? Business card?
Business card is in the folder.
Perfect.
So that's already taken care of. We have 35 employees. We have about 25 in Nashville, where our main office is. We have 10 at our main warehouse and processing center in rural Alabama. Volunteers, tens of thousands. At any given time, we have between 1,500 and 2,000 shoe drives going on across the country. Some are really small. Some are, we just had a 13-year-old girl collect 30,000 pairs of shoes in Rochester, New York. So it can be anywhere in between.
Wow.
Yeah,
all
that's
right.
a super story.
Hang on to the mic. Here's another speed round. What's more valuable to you? And then the question is actually, which of these two is worse? A 25% drop in funding or a 25% drop in volunteering? Bam.
Yes.
We're getting ready for the political campaign season now. Ask a question and get something else.
So we earn, from our microenterprise program and our travel program, we earn about 60% of our revenue. So if we had a 20%, 25% drop in funding, that's a smaller piece of our revenue. It would be easier to manage. If a quarter less people did shoe drives, it would be disastrous for us.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, for us as well, I mean, a quarter drop in volunteers is symptomatic of something greater than loss of money. I mean, you can lose money for a variety of reasons, but when people are dropping out as volunteers, that's a red flag. And so it gets you to sort of look at what's happening within the organization to cause that to happen. That's a much greater priority.
Okay.
Yeah, on the foundation side, of course, if we had a 25% decrease in our corpus value, that would hurt in our abilities to be able to serve the community.
Yep, great. Next question, we'll start with you, Tony. How do you recommend that we incorporate social innovation into our daily lives? And curbside recycling has already been done, so you can't do that one again.
So, I would say that that one's a tough one. I like Buddy's answer. We just got to be more, and Mohammed's, we got to be more entrepreneurially thinking. We've just got to be socially conscious, and every day there's an opportunity to talk to our children about that. I think probably some of the biggest life lessons we've learned is by watching our parents. And so if there's one thing they could change is being a stronger role model in terms of their engagement in the community, being social innovators, and finding that balance. And so I want to, before you go through all your questions, I also want to plant a seed. Buddy spent 3 days with the foundation last fall, and we've been working with them, and he's got a great social enterprise that the foundation's interested in funding. So I want him to at least have the opportunity to promote it a little bit. So.
Excellent.
I think that, sorry, did you want to answer?
No, I was going to say, how do you recommend incorporating social innovation into daily lives, or how do you do it outside of your specific business, maybe?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I've long come to terms with the fact that it's impossible to be a perfectly sustainable person. I think the word sustainable itself is unsustainable, but that's a different conversation. And it's just impractical. So I'd rather just focus on one cause and devote myself to that. And I understand that there's all sorts of philosophical paradoxes that engenders, because when you're focused on water and conserving water, but then you're driving a really fast sports car that burns a lot of gas. I get it, but it's better in my view personally to just focus on one thing as opposed to try to do everything all at once. So my suggestion would be genuinely pick something. Pick water, for example, and decide for 1 year that you will monitor how much water you use. That's it. How much water goes into the food that you eat. So think about how much water it takes for that steak versus, I don't know, maybe a cookie fortified with cricket flour, let's say, or air or anything of that sort.
Tony and I had this conversation. We had dinner last night. I think the most important thing we can each do, and I don't do it as much as I want, is not to be so quick to judge other people. If I can find the time to put myself in somebody else's shoes and not just sympathize but empathize, I think all kinds of ideas get unlocked. So that would be the first thing. And the second thing is, and then do something about it. So if you want to have social change, you have to act. I'm going to take Tony's opportunity. First of all, you should go to his program if you're interested in this. It was the smartest 3 days I've spent on social enterprise.
When's the next one, Tony? Do you have that schedule set up yet? June 16th. We'll make sure there's a link in the email afterwards.
Highly recommend it. Our biggest problem is we don't have enough shoes and clothes to meet the demand. If overnight we had 5 times more shoes and clothes, it'd be gone just like that. That is in this country, right? We're collecting shoes in Canada and Europe and Australia, and that's important, but it's really here. That's one problem. The second is we aren't offering any micro entrepreneurial opportunities here through Soles4Souls. So we're trying to find where those two lines cross. And so we are just beginning to give veterans the opportunity to build a business around collecting shoes and clothes in their community. We're a guaranteed buyer. So here's a group that has employment issues, we know, that loves to serve. It's a huge part of what drove them to go into the military, and they often can't find the same thing when they come back. So this is a chance for them to build a business, to connect with their churches, schools, civic organizations, build as big a business as they want, and we're a guaranteed buyer. So we take some of the business risk out. It's low cost to get into, and it gives them something meaningful to do, and it has a giant impact on us. We want to double our impact in the next 3 years. If we get 10 entrepreneurs going in the next 3 years, we think we can do that. So Tony's funding, we're still working that through, but if that happens, we'll have our first 3 a year from now.
Congratulations. Great. What organization, this will be for all 3 of you as well, is there an organization or company that is a best example of a model for successful social innovation? one that you look to and say, man, I'm trying to learn from that one?
Charity Water is the best online fundraising organization in the world. And we look at them. We're working with Ebola Agency right now. And so when they first came in, we're like, just copy their site. So Charity Water for us, online fundraising, they are masters, and they're a model of having a small group cover overhead so all the public money can go to projects is genius.
For us, there's just so many social enterprises that cover different aspects that are incredibly effective that should be emulated. I can't really say one in particular sort of is all-encompassing.
Okay.
So we're blessed that we work with a lot of nonprofits. We meet with 20 people, 20 nonprofits a week who have great social enterprise ideas. We also travel the country. So just a couple highlights. Local, everybody is now lifting up the AIDS Resource Center for their success in creating a for-profit pharmacy in the short north. When their CEO came to us a year and a half ago, they said that they needed $1.5 million. They went to every bank in town. No bank would give them any financing. They finally got Tel Ohio to give them a line of credit for $1.5 million. By the time they found us, they said, would you be willing to replace that $1.5 million for cheaper money? So they were paying 5.5%. Our average interest rate today is 4%. They said, would you replace it with philanthropic capital? We said yes. Within a year, they made $1 million in their first year of operation off their for-profit pharmacy as a nonprofit. That's rockstar. Secondly, on a national basis, we are big fans of Habitat for Humanity. Their social enterprise is called the Restore, so think of it as construction for the goodwills of construction. That generates $300 million a year across the country. They have spent 18 months in a 30-person strategy team, and they're going to grow that from $300 million to $1 billion as a social enterprise. And how they're going to fund it is they're going to borrow the money through social impact investing from foundations like ours to be able to fuel that growth and to be able to expand that service and that sustainable business model. Those also make about $1 million a year in those local communities that otherwise wouldn't be able to stand them up. So we're blessed that we see some fantastic models across the country, but it's very thoughtful, planful, and they're very strategic on how they're leveraging the resources of philanthropy in a different way other than donations, but borrowing against the corpus or the endowments of family foundations, community foundations is really the seed capital or the financing to be able to pursue that.
Great, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's about 9:30 and we always want to end on time, so we're going to take this opportunity to adjourn. You're welcome to talk with our guests here afterwards for a few minutes. We hope to see you on May 22nd when we host the Singapore ambassador to the U.S. Talk about why is Singapore always at the top of those education scores when we're looking across the world for the world's best scoring students, and what can we learn from them. So thank you again. Have a great rest of the day. We are adjourned.